And you guys are very kind, and this is going to be a nice, intimate, small group. So I'd rather, fine tune it for what you might have an interest in specifically than what I might have an interest in. So as we go through this, please, I will be glad to stand here and talk for the next hour. You probably don't want me to just stand here and talk for the next hour. So if you have a question, if you have some comments, if you have an experience you'd like to relate, we all will benefit from that, I'm sure. Trying to think of something else we might add to that. The 50, I'm not sure it keeps us as busy, and maybe that's part of thinking about a business plan, that maybe 50 at our house isn't enough to really keep us as busy as you should be if you were trying to have a profitable enterprise. And so, I look at you guys as kind of hardy souls to think about having some interest in business planning and where you might go with that business planning that you're thinking about. And I guess I'm interested, are you interested in business planning as something that, as a way of thinking about the future of a new enterprise, of expanding your present enterprise? What do you, yes sir?
Okay. Here's what I thought when I said this, when I read this business plan. My thoughts were, I've got friends that farm, grain farmers and cattle, cow stock. And of course, of course of talking to them, they've actually got through a grant started, they've got a business planner consultant, whatever you want to call them. They're not CPAs, but they come in and they come in with a program, and they work on his records. And he knows he grows corn, soybeans, feeds some fat cattle. He knows his corn cost him last year $3.62, which the guy comes to his house every month, every expense, and what he does, they spend an hour or so, and every expense is put for each enterprise. Okay, so being a farmer full time, know it all my life, and not thinking I'm not too old or anything new. I'm not a computer person, and I don't, but that interests me because we've got 2 or 3 different enterprises we're always concerned. When I think of business planning, I'm motivated. You've done got over that hurdle. So now you need to, and when he said that guy, that they done it with grants for several years, and now he pays him $300 or $400 a year on the squeak games too. I don't want to pay anybody $300 a year. So I'm motivated, but I'm tight. But I'm interested in it.
You know what? And I would argue that without putting everyone else, without asking everybody else, that we've got a bunch of motivated people, or you wouldn't be here to talk about business planning, because there's a lot of other interesting topics you could be sitting listening to this morning. And business planning is kind of like, I think many people think of it like this, that you just want to bash your head into something because it just ain't all that fun the way we usually think about it. So I'm going to ask you not to think of it as an academic activity, but one that moves you, and you're already motivated, moves you to some kind of action. And so with that, let's see, that was, we're always told to keep your agenda short. And this is about as short as I can make it, 2 items. Action, or some kind of bribery that will lead you to action. I'm not sure I have the right kind of bribery to do that, but I hope to provide a little incentive on top of your motivation to move to some kind of an action. And I kind of like, I don't know, maybe you follow Harlan Hughes, who's a retired professor from North Dakota. This is what I think about quite often, that as an enterprise, sure, I like doing it. But it would be a lot more fun, and it is a lot more fun when you're making money at it. And I thought he kind of succinctly put that together. And I have to believe that when somebody like Lewis and Clark, in 1804, when they were traveling across the West, that when they saw the Rocky Mountains, they knew what they were heading for. You know, they could see it. It was visual. It was right in front of them. Today, you might have a straight road right to the bottom of the range. But I think too many times we get involved in going down a path that is not well defined. We haven't clearly thought about it. And sometimes we just abandon it because we don't know quite where we're going. And I don't know how many of you, we take family vacations and we go camping. And too many times we'll set up camp at the end of the day, which is usually past when you might want it to be the end of the day. And instead of cooking, we go to try to find some place to eat. And we're driving around aimlessly, not knowing where we're going. And finally, at 11 o'clock, you just choose whatever you happen to drive by. And I think too often it's a little bit like this, that we just get to the end of the road and, you know what, I don't care, I'll just go some direction, just to go some direction. And the thing about that as business planning is that sometimes one of the goals of business planning is to actually set a path and to know where you're going to go. And you do it when you're sitting here calm, collected, and not riding in the car at 11 o'clock trying to find some place to eat. And you can hear the testy voices in the back seat, maybe the front seat. You know that you've got to do something, but you're under pressure, and now you're just willing to do almost anything just to be done. And I think business planning one of the goals is to take that out of it, take the emotion out of it, so that, you know, it's easy to plan when there's lots of money coming in. It's not so easy to plan when that's not the case. And we need to plan for those times when there isn't a lot of money coming in. And instead of making decisions because something has happened, it's dinner time and we have to do something, instead of making those emotional decisions, let's make a decision today that says, at 6 o'clock, we're going to stop and we're going to research and find some place to go to eat, instead of doing that 11 o'clock driving around. So I want to lay just a little bit of a foundation, and I hope my foundation here, I hope, is just to build up and then give you some encouragement as to why it's important to do some business planning and kind of lay a little foundation. So the United States produces 19% of all beef production in the world. And just to get some stats out of the way, I think to me that we all know about the decline in numbers. We don't need to talk about that. I'm kind of fascinated by the high retail price, 562, and the average herd size, about 40. I think we typically know that, and we also know that the average age of a beef producer is more looking like me than a lot of you, and it's increasing instead of decreasing. And just to put that in comparison, when we look at this, we've all kind of over the last couple of years have seen these numbers, but you have to go back 60-some years to see where our beef production, our inventory, is where it was today, where it was 60-some years ago. And to drive that a little closer to home, what does that mean? So look at some of the states. Now, I'm from Pennsylvania. We're up in cattle numbers in 2014. West Virginia and Virginia are down in cattle numbers over the last year. Overall, in the Northeast, we're down in cattle numbers. Take a look at some of the other regions across the country, and you see kind of a mix that looks like this, not tremendously different. Our competitors, I'm thinking again about our competitors and why we might need to do some business planning. So we've got competitors in the world. Brazil brings this much to beef production in the world. The European Union, another 13%. China is increasing at a rapid pace and now providing 10% of all beef production in the world. Kind of like the quote from Ken Mumford. He talks about customers and knowing how to satisfy their needs. He moved feedlots out into the country closer to where the feeder cattle were, close to a main highway. And what was the next thing he did? He started talking to the grocers, the people that were buying his end product, and one of the first people to cut up and put in a box primal cuts of beef was Montfort Packing. And he did that because he started to listen to his customers. And he also drove efficiency by moving out closer and having those. And so thinking about our customer, where do you sell your product? You know, where do you sell your product? Is it something like this? Is it to an individual that may raise them a little further through the food chain? Is it a feedlot? Is it this person? You know, are you going direct to the market? Are you selling directly to somebody that's taking it home and putting it in their grocery store? Well, we have a tremendous, you know, and we can credit lots of things, and we found out that the elasticity of demand for beef is very strong despite the high prices that we're seeing. The consumers are still buying, and restaurant chains are still marketing beef at a high level, but we also know that a lot of it is also being marketed as hamburger, as ground beef, and not some of those higher end cuts. The largest restaurant chain in the world. And what's the largest restaurant chain in the world doing? Diversifying? What else?
They got more chicken they've ever had.
More chicken? And what are they asking their chicken producers and going to ask their beef producers to do? I'm sorry? Natural. Is to move away from antibiotics. They've already done it.
Antibiotic free.
They're asking, and they will demand that, and they have demanded it, and it will happen because they think that their customer is asking for that. So they're going to try to satisfy. So how are we, as beef producers, going to satisfy that demand? And do you have a plan to do that? Even, you know, I saw this just the other day, over the weekend, I guess, that duck fat is, you know, if you are reading a lot of recipes, that the duck fat is one of those things that chefs like to use. Well, it appears, by virtue of this last article I read, that beef fat may be the replacement for duck fat. So this guy puts beef fat into his pasta and sells it as a high-end product. So I guess what I'm trying to say is beef has a strong demand among us as consumers, just everyday people that go to the grocery store, people that spend a lot of money. It's not unusual, and those steak chains that sell a dinner at $100 or $150 generally are doing very well. And we've got a lot of people out there buying our product and continue to marketing it for us.
Food stamps, what? And West Virginia for what? For the people who get the EBT cards and food stamps, beef itself, beef.
What are they buying with? I'm sorry.
Food stamps.
Foods.
They buy whatever they want to.
Yeah,
They can afford if ground beef's $5.29. They can afford it.
And we're happy that people are out there buying ground beef at $5. But I think I understand your point. Yeah. This guy his father was a German immigrant. I'm going to tell kind of a story and finish at the end, trying to build a little bit about business planning here. So you might know Bob Claiborne, born in the 1800s. His father was an attorney and a judge, moved to Texas. This guy went to school, became an attorney, and one of the things he did in Texas was he worked for landowners, and as people got title to land, oftentimes a larger landowner would come along and want to buy that property and assume title to the land, and he defended some small landowners in Texas. And in the process of that, he was defending the title and proving that they owned the property. And in the process, he was involved in a pretty good-sized lawsuit, and that lawsuit was him defending some small landowner who held title to land, and somebody with a lot of land was trying to assume this guy's property. In the end, he was fortunate enough and won the case, and the large landowner, who he beat in court, came along and said, you know what, I'm really impressed with what you did. I'd like to hire you as my full-time legal counsel. Why don't you come to work for me? And he did, and shortly afterwards, he died. And his widow said, you know what, you've done such a great job for us. We'd like you to run our cattle operation. And about a year later, and some of you might know this story, about a year later, he married the landowner's daughter, Alice. And over a course of many years, 40, 50, They diversified their operation. They did planning. They had good people management. They looked at what their resources were, and in the process of looking what they had as resources, kind of drove their business the way that they thought would bring the most income in to their ranch based on what they had available. And they did it through business planning. And he articulates that in some of his diaries, that the value of the planning that he did was so important. And it wasn't important just to he and his wife, but their future generations that went on to lead and be the managers of this huge ranch in Texas. So I'll circle around to this as we finish up. But I kind of like the idea that success leaves clues. That if you do something good, my memory's too short. Unless it really had an impact on me, I might not remember until it happened again. I need to make notes of the things that really happened good. And those success notes will drive some of the things that I do in my business plan. What's the wrong path? Some of the wrong path is, and I'm giving you some of this based on research that says that these things happen because we don't plan, because we haven't thought about the future, and instead of planning, we're all familiar with the saying, if you don't plan, you just plan to fail. And this comes from some of that research, and no experience. Some of these things we know intuitively are accurate. It's difficult to get into any business if you don't have some experience. I would argue that we, as involved in agriculture, are an optimistic group, and sometimes overly optimistic. And in the process of that, we underestimate what it'll cost to do something. And that causes problems, and that does get us down a wrong path. And sometimes we get attracted to shiny paint and chrome, and we want to see what's in the neighbor's driveway or in the neighbor's barn. And so we spend money on things that maybe financially don't make all that much sense. Maybe it makes us feel good for some period of time. And I would also argue that many of us, I'm maybe afraid to make a profit is the wrong terminology, but I think sometimes we're embarrassed to ask somebody when we're selling Hamburg, to ask them for $5 a pound or $6 a pound. That we would prefer to say, you know what, it's okay, $3. Give me $2.50 and you can have everything you want. That we are embarrassed to try to get our expenses and to make a profit. But if you walk into a grocery store, they're not so embarrassed. But I see it in small businesses around our community, people I know that have small stores, and they do a wonderful job, and I'll walk in, it's something, you look at something and it has a price tag of $1.50. Geez, I think I would pay $4 for this, but they're only asking $1. And it's because they don't value what they've got in front of them, and so we tend not to price ourselves where we need to. I'm not saying. Some of those success clues. Are you passionate about it? Do you have a business plan? Do you have sufficient capital? Do you have financial controls? And I never rule out some luck and persistence. And I think that persistence oftentimes drives the so-called luck portion of that.
There's no such thing as luck.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if you just sit down and hope luck's going to happen, I think that you have to combine those. And if you're working hard and you're persistent in the process, then you put yourself in those positions where something that you might call luck happens to you. So this is easy. The number one reason I think, and some researchers have shown, actually that's not true. I think that we don't like to do a business plan, and it's simple. We're just mad at money. We just really don't want to make money. We don't want to ask for $5 a pound for hamburger because we're embarrassed. We think that's too much. And the key to that is always remember that while I might not want to pay $6 for hamburger, there are lots of people that will. And so it's not what I want to pay. It's not what you want to pay. It's not how you think it ought to be worth. But look at what it costs you to produce it, look at the market, be aware, and then charge it. Why a written plan? There are lots of reasons. And it doesn't have to be a 103-page epistle that sits up on your shelf and nobody looks at again. It truly can be the back of an envelope, as long as you've got some goals and plans and financial plans on it. It doesn't have to be that big academic enterprise that you spend a lot of time on. So I want to encourage you to think about that, and we're going to work through that. Before we're finished, I hope you all walk out of here with a sheet of paper that has some business plan information on it. And we'll see that happens. Clarifying your thoughts, sharing your goals, writing them down, giving them to somebody else, and showing your business plan to somebody else. Particularly, a spouse, somebody that loves you, somebody in your family. Because why? Because they'll hold your feet to the fire. Somebody that loves you will say, "Oh, you said you were going to do this by the end of the year, or the end of the month. Are you going to?" And if you don't write it down, it just becomes vapor. And if I don't achieve the goal, okay, who knows about it? Oh, maybe only me. So I can let it slide, and I can let it slide next month, and I can let it slide the next month. So write it down, and truly, I believe it creates hope and enthusiasm in the process. So that passion turns into those other characteristics, and of course, because then it puts dollars in your pocket. David Cole, you might be familiar with, retired professor, economist from Virginia, has said this many times in his presentations. People who have a business plan generate twice the profits of those with. Is that not enough reason to have a business plan? Now, I would argue if your goal is to sell 4 steers a year, maybe you don't need a business plan. If your goal is, and truly, maybe it's more of a lifestyle enterprise. But if your goal is to sell 40, or to move from 4 to 40, or 100, or 200, then I'd argue you need some kind of a business plan. And the business plan, we're going to get to it. So some of the things you need to do. Why? I asked a few people here. I asked them earlier. I guess why do you want to do a business plan? Is it to expand? Is it to start? Is it to manage those priorities so that as you think about your business, do you have fence to build, water lines to put in, buildings to repair, equipment that you need or repair, deferred maintenance that now needs to have taken place? Give it a priority. And how are you going to track that unless you write it down and you have some means of doing that, rather than just all up here? I would argue that the famous reason for needing a business plan, I don't do very many. I probably do 10 or 12 a year for folks, or work with. I don't do them. Work with people. I had a call last week from an individual that wanted and needed a business plan. Why do you think he needed a business plan?
Get a loan.
Exactly.
Some loan officer said you have to have
that was exactly right. And he was willing to pay some, and he did. He went out and paid somebody $200 or $300 to do a business plan that probably he'll never look at it again. Means nothing other than he satisfied the loan officer's requirement. You're exactly right. Sometimes we do need to seek investors, hire people. How do you know if you can afford to hire people or plan to hire somebody unless you have some financial picture of what your business is going to look like over some period of time? Share your idea. Assign tasks. Know who's going to do what. It's kind of important in our place because, I think one of the other things that I would argue that we get caught up in is kind of the Superman complex, that we think we need to do it all. And instead of delegating responsibilities to maybe other family members or to outside professionals that we need, I don't do my own dental work. And I'm not sure that we need, to think that we can do everything from our legal to our finances. You were talking about having somebody come in and look at financial stuff. I'm not sure personally for myself, I'm qualified to do that. I need to seek outside help on that. truly, over the last couple of years, we are in a unique moment in agricultural history because of drought, crop prices, that we find ourselves where maybe it's really not that hard to make money. Maybe it's not that hard today to do that. But if you've been in the beef business for very long, it wasn't very long ago that it was pretty hard to make money.
And won't be long till it'll go back that way.
Thank you.
Historically, it has to happen.
You're exactly right. And I'll use that as the reason, another reason for a business plan was you might not need it today, but you sure could have used one 10 years ago, and you'll be able to need one in a couple of years from now, because we'll see a cycle, I would expect. So, now is the time. If you're developing a business plan and there is excess cash, or there's more cash than you had in the past from selling the product, what do? I mean, do you just fritter it away?
Income average.
Income. And you have to do that?
Oh, it works.
It works too? Do you look at some of the things and prioritize them and say, instead of just putting those dollars in the bank account and writing checks and putting it on, which is a little bit like, I guess, going to school and on the last day of school, you find out that you failed gym. Well, it would have been great to know along the way someplace that I wasn't doing so good in gym. And I argue that the same is true here, that it's easy to put the money in the bank account, put some in the savings, and then we just, I don't know if I'm the only one, but if I do, it just kind of gets frittered away. I start writing things, buying things, and sometimes I don't know if I need them. But if I had made a list of some of these things, then maybe I would dedicate some dollars specifically for that, and in the end, have something for that. Because in those couple years, when we would expect to see a cycle going down, it will help us be more profitable at that time. If we can spend some of those reserves today and put ourselves in a better position than we might be if we didn't do it. Right, I guess this is a given. It's profitability is not a guarantee. It seems pretty easy today, perhaps, but it's not always the case. Yes, sir.
Some of what you said there, I agree with a lot of some of that. You got to decide whether you're going to be a farmer or you're going to be a living. You got to keep your personal life separated from farm business. You talk about buying a truck for the way. You end up your personal life is fine. You don't need it. You got farming.
I think that's a good. I think that's a good mindset. I'm just not sure we all.
You got to have.
And if you don't have some plan, and for those of us that might not be so dedicated to that philosophy,
You've got to.
you need. And how do you drive those of us that maybe aren't? My argument is that if I don't write it down and say this is what I'm going to do, then some of those can get away from it. I don't argue a point of what you're saying. You need to dedicate that.
That's a plan.
That's a plan. That's a plan. Sure.
It works for me, but it's a plan, and it works for you right now today. Tomorrow you might come up with another idea, bring it up with another plan. At least you got something started.
That's right. In a business plan should not be something that I write up today and put on the shelf and forget about it. If it's not a living, so-called living document, if I don't pick it up and look at it and say, here's what I said I was going to spend the money on, and when I had this X amount of dollars, I was going to do this, but maybe the market conditions change. Maybe I have an opportunity to buy some more land or some cattle. I need to pull this down and say, you know what? Maybe plan B is I invest in this and I prioritize differently than I had. Absolutely, you don't put it up and forget about it because things change in our life every day, and opportunities arise for us every day, and we need to be able to account for those. So I'm certainly not saying write a business plan and stick to it by the letter because things change, and if you don't change with it, then I'm not sure.
You're saying right now, I'm saying you got to have.
Oh.
You have a personal life and you got a business. Don't get into the business for the person.
would argue that some of us, some lifestyle, I forget what term you use, lifestyle farmers, it's all commingled because we're not paying ourselves. But if you're really in a business and you're trying to operate a business as a business, then part of that also is there's a return to labor, and that goes into your family. That's different than the farm. That's an expense that goes against the farm. And so this is where the action comes in, that you actually are going to do something, and I'm going to ask you to do something before you leave here, that you have something that you have written down for good or for bad. And if you would, fold this into four. So fold it in half and then fold it in half again, if you would please. So you just end up with something that looks like this. And as we go through a little bit here, I'll ask you to put some headings on this, and we'll have you walk out with something. So I'd ask you at the top left-hand corner, to just write in your business. So give it the title of business, and what is your business? Are you a cow-calf? Are you a stalker? Are you feeding? Are you going to an end product? Are you, so what is your business? And what is your business? Just make it very short. It doesn't have to be, I'm not asking you to write that 70-page epistle. Just what is your business? Or what is your business that you want it to be? So, what are you producing? And this just addresses that. So, what are you producing? Are you producing for the mass market? Are you producing for some niche? Organic, grass-fed, natural? Some of those markets are growing rapidly and continue to. What is your business? And over on the top right-hand corner, if you put that background, use a title of background. So, write down, what are you selling? What are you selling? Are you calves? Are you stalkers? Is it purebred breeding stock? Well, what are your plans? So maybe it's beyond just today. So maybe you're selling something today and you have a goal of selling something else in 2 years or 4 years. What is that? And in the process of that, what are the challenges that you face? Is it financing? Is it constraints of land? Constraints of labor? Is it fence? Is it water? What are some of the challenges that you have, that you face in the business that you see yourself in? And those challenges can probably just be identified also as those, I call them critical risks. What's the risk to that enterprise? And they're pretty much the same as the challenges that we talked about. I like to use this example, and you might be familiar with the Bobolink area in New Jersey. They are quite a diversified operation. They started out with milk, diversified cheese. Where do you go for cheese? You might go to some kind of meat product, which they did, to bread, and they diversified and said, you know what? As we started as a dairy, but we want to do something else. We need to diversify, and they decided, and among those other things, that they would sell grass and beef, and they found a way to do that in a very populated area. But they also, and you'll see it here in a moment, it's not all because they have a populated area that they're able to sell what they sell, and to sell it at an average price of $12.
We live in Ritchie County. You keep, I mean, we put that dog up and down, we put that dog, tied it, drug it, kicked it, did ugly to it. We know people that live in Pennsylvania, we know people who are from North Carolina, Ashland, a family down there. Yeah, there's places you can get that much money. Ritchie County, you cannot do it. It ain't gonna happen. They ain't gonna pay it, they don't have the money to pay it. You know, no.
And the problem is to deliver it to the people that can and will.
And that's a challenge, and there are people that have figured that out.
And
Yes,
if
Carl,
these
I'm sorry. Well,
suburbs are Baltimore, you can do it.
yeah, you good point. And that.
But I
and,
always found out that when you go there, that there's always 6 people in front of you. That they're not saying, we can't, we're willing to pay $15 a pound for Grace Dead Beef, we can't find stuff nowhere. Never run into that
yeah,
yet.
no, don't have that problem.
I'll
Yes,
give
sir.
you the answer. He's been talking about it for the last 15, 20 months. You've got to have that plan, and if your goal is to get a net of 65, 96, you've got to have a plan with a marked bid. You might not live in Ritchie County anymore, maybe California. So you've got to have that goal, and if you don't want to stick to that goal, then you've got to change your thinking in your mind what you're going to do. It might not be cattle. It might be chickens. It might be hogs. You're still building the farm. But there again, you might be a policy.
I would put in for marijuana law when they start giving those out.
Yes, yes, sir. In the back. Anybody else who wants?
Depends on the individual. Like someone gave me once is if you have enough animals, that market's high, so sell what you can sell high, don't give up your everyday customers. When that price comes back down, you still have this base income coming in from some regulars that maybe you're not getting this high end, but you're getting, fair price. Always pretend
I think possibilities there, but see, here's the other thing we can look at, we want to increase the price a little bit higher than the retail. And that market comes down, there's one now, set price for maybe much more, just because of the quality. They feel good about buying direct off the farm, all the different components together, and it turns into food. So we're looking at $7
do you have a market for $12 beef? Maybe you don't, and that's a challenge for you. Then is there a way that you are going to find those people that are willing to pay $12? Or are you gonna go down a different business model and say, well, I'm not going to the retail customer or the end customer. I am gonna sell to a feeder operation, a stocks operation. I'll let somebody else do that. Maybe this gentleman needs more beef to satisfy his demand because he's close to that market. Yeah, I guess what I'm hearing is there's not one story that's going to fit everybody.
It's that whole model up there, you're showing the gross and you're netting out the tax kill and cutting back. You're forgetting what it costs that person to live in that area.
Oh.
And to own the business as opposed to somebody here.
Well,
So
great.
that is truly not net per head. You know, that guy's property taxes, $20,000 a year and we're paying $900 or something. You know, you gotta weigh that in the overall.
Yeah, that's a good point. And my object here is just to show that there are people out there that are willing to spend $12 and they found them. And they happen to be in a good, they're fortunate. They're in a great area that can happen. So your point's well made.
Folks have been very popular. This federal employee, that's 20% over the initial salary for the employee in the last percent. Okay, apply that here. That's almost $1,300 off their net for living expenses. So then, now we get down into $5,200. Can we sell our beef in West Virginia for $10? Because we can net the same over dairy and beef.
Actually, there should be another question. I don't know how many people in this room even know about it. But how many of you call cows and take what's taken out? There's opportunities and IE and the ear tag crap. Well, you put right there, just keep that, you know, certify that cow take what's taken out. You know, it's not very hard to do that. Technically, the law in West Virginia is to protect our cattle. We don't protect them, we will pass them off. We're just not enforcing it. I don't know if a lot of you know about that. You can take anything, I think it is up to 18 months old, across state line, without having done anything over, you got to have that come certify our health and all that. Oh, I ain't told 18 months.
Some of that-
How many people knows about it?
Some of that state dependent. West Virginia's got some agreements with surrounding states that they'll tag West Virginia animals and those kind of stuff. I'm not sure where you're at. But I know
Well,
there is.
more,
I'm not sure what Pennsylvania is going like. Virginia has agreed to tag West Virginia animals, those kind of.
that's what I heard, if you took it over, say to Waynesburg or something, I heard, I don't know if the police are there, but some of them, technically, you don't have done, they'll charge you to do it over there.
And usually the market is cost of that. But I think back to your question, Brad, I think you said, can we sell beef for $10? I think the question is, can you sell it? What's your expenses, what's your ability to profit that you want to see from that? Maybe $8 is profitable and meets that goal. You got no cost of production.
And you have to realize how much you have to sell. You don't have a zillion pounds, you don't need a zillion customers. You only have, head and you want to
And truly, we have to look at that's why you do a business plan. You look at your situation and say, I can't either. I would argue that I couldn't do. But wait a minute and see what else they do here. Okay, so it's not, it is, marketing plays such a large role, and I'd argue that before you grew one animal or produced one crop or 1 pound of hamburger, that you know where it's going to go. Because marketing afterwards usually means we're ending up with something and we don't have a home for it. So thinking about that, who is your market? You made a great point. We we all have different markets and different people that are going to be buying our product. Where are we selling it? Who's buying it? And is that market, are we in a community where our population is declining? Average income is going up. I live in an area where we've got a lot of, to some extent, you too, I guess, a lot of natural gas drilling where there's money coming into the community. People have a little more disposable income than they had in the past. Are they willing to spend it on beef? I think we're finding out that they are. Is it large enough? How are you going to hold your customers? How will you and do you set your price? How do you do that? I think we've heard some of that, and I think, Ron, you mentioned, look at, you need to know what the market is. You need to know what your cost of production is. And how are you going to know that unless you do some finance? And if your financial records are your Schedule F that you're going to send in a month and a day, then please stick with me for just another minute, because we need more than a Schedule F if that's how if that's how you're looking at profit and loss. And we're going to do this quick. So here's what Bobolink does. I wanted to get to this quick. That a third of their products, a third of what they sell is on the internet. It's not people who live next door to them. It's not people in their community. A third are the people in their community, and they travel for the other third. We're not going to take time for this. I love this little clip because when I think about passion, and when you think about passion, and you're obviously passionate about what you're doing, and passion, one of the things I've learned is that the Latin for passion is suffering. And I think that a lot of us like the marketing part, a lot of us like the production part, but the next part is not oftentimes the most fun part, and I think this is the suffering part of the passion for many of us, that we have to suffer through doing the financial part, because if we don't, all the rest is for naught. And so we need to have, and I think just as we we're going to go through this rapidly because we have just minutes. You might be happy. Get your farm report card. It doesn't need to be real deep. We need a couple things: an income statement and a balance sheet. The income statement shows what you earned last year, and the balance sheet shows what you own. Have those two things, and if you have a net income, it shows you not only what you sold, on the Schedule F, but you've raised things that you didn't sell. You've got inventory. You've got some things on Schedule F that aren't articulated that you have taken, and there's either an expense or an income for it that isn't accounted for on Schedule F. So you need to have those two financial statements. I talked about the guy that called and said he just needed a business plan for the loan officer. That's right. He paid somebody to do his push-ups, but it didn't get him anything. You need to do it yourself. And so think about your goals, because as the last part of your business plan, you want to have some goals. What are they? Is it a quality of life? Is that part of it? Is it something about your family? Do you have family goals that go along with your business goals? Do you want to have a family business? Is it something you want the family to be involved in? Is it something that you want to do in the evening, in the mornings? And how does it relate to production? Some research recently, last year, out of it was Minnesota, Nebraska, and I think Kansas maybe. Some researchers out of those three universities looked at herd size, and what they found was, if you're going to be the low-cost producer, you need to have 500 cows. If you don't have 500 cows or more, then it's going to be difficult to be a low-cost producer, according to their research. But the caveat was, okay, maybe you don't have 500 cows. What else can you do to be a profitable enterprise? Their research last year showed you have to have a high production performance level, low feed costs, and lower fixed costs. So mortgage payments, truck payments, equipment payments, all have to be in that lower fixed cost area. So 3 items. If you can't be the largest producer, then look at these 3 items and say, how do I satisfy those so that I can have a sustainable, profitable business? Not just today when I'm selling feeders for $2.50 or $3, but you know, in a couple years when maybe they're $1, or somebody else give me a forecast. I'm interested. What's your goal, production or profit? And well, I don't know if you're familiar with the hedge, but the more things change, the more they remain the same. And I think we see that in our life of change. And to wrap up the story that I started with here at the beginning about Bob Claiborne. Bob married into the family, into the King family. Alice King was the daughter of the widow, and they grew. He grew, and his family grew the King Ranch to about 600,000 acres at the time, around the turn of the century, and they diversified. And in his memoirs, he talks about the business planning he did and how important that was to the success of it, because it gave him a chance to look at what they had in the way of resources, not just dollars and cents, but our labor, the land we had, the weather and climate we had, what our markets were. And eventually, over the course of time and his family, so when Bob died, when Bob Claiborne died, his son took over the operation, and his son took over the operation. He eventually grew it to 1 million acres. And you might know it grew to 1 million acres, not just in Texas, but across the United States. So with that, I'll leave you with the idea that business planning is more than just an academic enterprise. It's not something, to this gentleman's point in the back, that if you do it and write it down, it's got something you look at, and as things change, markets change, your family changes, the opportunities that arrive for you that you might be able to take hold of change. Put them in your business plan. Pull it down and look at it every so often so you remember what your priorities are, you remember where you want to go with your business, and who's going to be involved with it. And with that, I'll say thank you very much. I appreciate you hardy groups of business people. And there's a question.
What were the topics that you
Oh.
were going to do on the other 2 blocks?
I'm sorry, financial and goals. Thank you for asking that.
I thought this was a very good session. As a matter of fact, we probably go on 3 more.
We could go on a long time, Carl, but Carl, I'm gonna say this, you made a good point. And I heard it back here. You said diversify. That's exactly what you said. And you put up there cow-calf. Cow-calf.
You're limiting yourself.
Yeah, but that's probably where more of the future lays for West Virginia producers. As diverse as the state is, the smallest the farm is to diversify. Chickens, goats, sheep. Do we have to do cow? Do we have to be locked into that? But anyway,
Yeah, diversify.
I want to thank you all for attending today. And we're running about 15 minutes behind time, so the break will be from 10:45 to 11:15. If you need to check out the hotel or anything before noon, checkout time is noon. So keep that in mind. Mr. Laughner, I appreciate your input on this. And
Thank you.
God, I was just getting
We're
business
just
was
getting
my
started,
thing.
really.
It was my thing.
You know, you don't have to have